Welcome to this week's news program. I'm your host and editor, Diana Longry. Thank you for tuning in. This program, we're going to be bringing you news about the city of Maplewood. And to help me with this week's news report is my co-anchor, Mr. Kevin Berglund. Thank you, Mr. Berglund, for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Now, tonight, what we are going to do is that we are going to take several loose ends that we have covered in past news programs, and we're going to bring them together and tie them up in a nice, pretty bow. Previously, we have reported on the Wakefield Pavilion that was constructed in the Gladstone neighborhood right next to Wakefield Lake. Now, as you will recall, there was a skating rink there and a warming house, which they called the bunker. And the city council decided that the bunker wasn't sufficient enough as a warming house for people who were using the ice skating rink. So they decided that they would spend $2 million to construct a brand new pavilion in place of the bunker. So this $2 million does not include the cost of demolition of the bunker. Now, this new building is supposed to be a multi-purpose building to replace some of the meeting space that Maplewood lost when they gave over the exclusive use of the Maplewood Community Center to the YMCA. So you see, they are billing it as a community center when in reality, is it really a community center? Well, we're going to get into that in this news program. Another news program that we talked about a few weeks back was the appointment of new city council members to the Maplewood City Council. And we showed film footage where one of those individuals asked questions of the council about their strategic planning and where they came up with their strategic planning. And council member Brian Smith, his answer was that they do all that important work at their city council retreat. Well, guess what? The Maplewood City Council, now that they have all their appointed members on the city council, they have held their Maplewood City Council retreat. And we have reported on these programs in past years that these retreats really focus more on what are their skill sets individually, communication, how to do branding, and not really talking about strategic planning for the city's future. Now, Mr. Berglund, you had the opportunity of going to this year's retreat and to video cam some of the film footage that we have of that retreat and to hear some of the discussions. Let's take a look. This is a video that was created by the city of Maplewood to promote their construction of this $2 million Wakefield Pavilion.
I'm Chris Kirchhoff with Versacon Construction, and I'm standing out here at the Wakefield Park building inside the 30 by 40 foot multi-purpose community room. At our last update, we were just doing the rough and carpentry and setting the structural beams along with the roof joists. Since then, we've finished out the space, we've installed the windows that overlook Wakefield Lake, and we've installed the structural beams along with the beautiful tongue and groove cedar ceiling. One of the key features of the community room is our stone fireplace, which has a natural gas insert, which will help make this space feel warm and cozy. Another key feature to our community room is our servery, where people can serve food and beverages at their parties. And now let me take you through the rest of the building. Through these double doors, we have our main corridor, which goes to our front entrance. And from the main corridor, we also get to our handicap accessible men's and women's restrooms. Down the hall here, we have our program space room, which serves as a warming room during the winter season. When you come visit the building, you'll notice that in this program space, we've matched the cedar tongue and groove ceiling, which is the same as in the community room. And throughout the year, this space will be used for classes and other programs. And during the winter season, it'll be used for the new hockey rink right out here. Thank you for your continued interest in this project. Log on to the city website to learn about any upcoming events and rink hours.
This video, of course, was shot in the winter. You saw the snow. And this is April, so of course it is now fully constructed, and they wanted to have the retreat there to demonstrate and to show off to the council members what a wonderful job they did. Mr. Berglund, any initial observations that you had in being at this pavilion?
Well, this gentleman, this is the Maplewood promotional video, of course. And he's really flying high on this whole center, that it's really the best palace there could be built in Maplewood. Now it does have a vaulted ceiling, and of course that looks nice, and a lot of glass in their big room there. But you think, as you walk in, this really is kind of nothing, kind of small, kind of it sure looked a lot better on film than it did when you're present there. It really doesn't have anything that really is going to stand out, and I'm not sure what the purpose of the center is. We do know, as he said, one of the key features is the fireplace, and the other key feature is the servery. So I think we'll want to focus on what he is looking at, his key features.
Exactly. Now, when I first arrived to help set up the camera, the first thing that I noticed was the acoustics of the room, that when you enter the large meeting room where they were going to be having their meetings around these tables, the acoustics was very poor. And I was concerned that we would not be able to have good audio in order to be able to provide the film footage for our viewers on these newscasts. And the city manager originally had us scheduled to be slated to put our cameras and to be positioned in this side off room, which is more like a huge closet where they store the tables and the chairs and other assorted supplies. And I could tell that if we were to have our camera set up at that location, behind the blue line that was indicated for us, that there was going to be no way that we were going to have good audio at all. So we were able to obtain permission from the city manager to move our camera into the meeting room, which of course was very important. The acoustics were still poor, but at least we've got audio.
And it does seem kind of odd that the city of Maplewood would put the press in the utility room or the closet and be shooting out of there instead of in this, what they look at as a premier room. Now, of course, you'll have to go down there and decide if it's a premier room. They have a kind of a designer concrete floor, and they have a lot of windows, a lot of glass, and they have a vaulted wood ceiling. There's very little ability for noise to be absorbed. So if you can think of being in a gym, that's kind of what it almost sounds like. You're really not having a real good conversation because of the poor acoustics of the room.
Right.
And if they are going to use that for lectures or meetings or parties, instead of for a gym, and I don't think they're going to use it for a gym because there's all these glass windows, I think they are going to have to bring that back to the drawing board, although it's completely done, and remodel it or do something about it to absorb the sound, because I don't know how you could miss it.
Right. And some of our film footage, our viewers will be able to see and hear that for themselves. Now, we're going to play the clip that I had mentioned about when Mr. Bill Knutson, who was interviewing to be appointed to the Maplewood Council, asked the council about when and how they did their strategic planning. And he was told that all of that, and most importantly, a lot of it was done at the retreats. And so let's take a look at that clip to refresh the historical perspective of that.
One of the things that's important about board and leadership roles is to be adaptive. So I was thinking, my question, what I was thinking before, is there were a lot of years that I've been here, and there was some years that were amazingly dysfunctional. And what always struck me is I wondered how decisions were really made. Because I used to evaluate organizations as a reviewer, and I'd go in and ask the staff in about 15 minutes, how are decisions made around here? And you could pretty much find out what the culture of the organization was by just asking that question. So when I think of you know, the kind of roles that you'd have, you really need, I think, you know, my view is to take technical information and adapt it to strategy. So tell me about the key things in your strategic plan that you really want to work hard on, and you really want to recruit someone to help you with that.
Okay. Going to go with you first, Councilmember Smith.
I just want to make sure I understand the question. So you're talking about, so what is our process for the strategic plan, or?
Yes.
And then what are the key parts in?
Right.
Like
What are the
parts-
key what are the key things you're looking at from a strategic plan, and how did you actually, just quickly, how did you get there?
Sure.
In other words,
Sure.
How long does he have?
Yeah, right. So you see most of it here. I mean, we don't, I'd say the part that, the most important part that's not here at the dais is our annual retreat, where we spend, you know, a better part of a day together talking through really difficult issues. Those are also, of course, open to the public, and I don't know that anyone would actually want to sit through them, but that's the time where we get together to really talk in depth in long form about the particular issues facing the city. And I think that's where we work to prioritize what is, you know, what is it about redevelopment we need to focus on? What is it around financial management and those sorts of things that we want to push towards? You know, I think financial management is a good example from the time since I've joined the council. You know, we put together sort of some guiding principles for staff around financial management, as well as the actual goals, but kind of where are we looking to go? What is our, as a council and as an organization, what is our idea about debt and some of those things? And those have been some rich conversations, I think, but have started to give us some yardsticks to say, all right, this is, you know, that we're not reinventing the wheel every time we go back to start talking strategic planning. But it's a learning process. I mean, I think also none of us come to the table thinking we have the answers. It's an evolving learning process, and I think it gets a little better all the time.
Mr. Knudsen indicated that it's important to be adaptive. Keep that in mind for later on in our news program when that word and that trait comes up again in the retreat that he later attends that we were there to videotape. Now, Mr. Brian Smith, in being challenged with, well, where do you do your strategic planning? His quote was, well, most of it is right there at the council chambers, but, well, there is a most important part that is not. It's done at the retreat. And that these retreats are open to the public, but who from the public would want to go there to hear what they have to say? Now, I find that a very cynical attitude about welcoming the public to your retreat. Mr. Berglund.
And of course, what he goes on to say is two of the important things that they occur at these retreats and their strategic planning is number one, redevelopment, number two, fiscal management. Now, of course, it's odd that at this last retreat, even though he had just, these were on the top of his mind just 2 months ago, or approximately 2 months ago, I don't think they touched on either of those subjects. And even if they would touch on those subjects, like you would say, well, I think there's many people who would like to hear if their neighborhood was to be targeted for redevelopment. That seems to be something that people are very interested in. Why would the public want to know about what they're going to do behind the scenes in redevelopment? Like you say, cynical. And people want to know why their taxes continue to go up and up and up, additive each year raise them and then add on to that raise year after year, and that there's so many potholes despite all this extra money collected, despite all these additional fees they've added in Maplewood. Fiscal management, people want to know what is wrong with the policies of fiscal management. And overall, when you look at the big picture, I don't think I heard any discussion of any big vision. Brian Smith, the council member there, made it sound like at this council retreat, they're talking about some bigger vision, and then they're talking about a mission and the goals. I don't recall them talking about any of that.
And we can speak with authority because we were at last year's retreat and we have it videoed from beginning to end. And the primary focus last year was on branding. How can they best brand Maplewood and what plan they're going to accomplish that by? The branding. Now that's what last year's theme was. The year before that, it was basically looking at their skill set of the various council members and the staff members and how they can best work together knowing what each other's skill sets are. That's what they talked about at that retreat. And again, we do have the video from beginning to end of that retreat as well. Now, in that past clip, Mr. Brian Smith, he indicates that at their retreats, they have these difficult discussions that they prioritize. They talk about, as you indicated, financial management, and they have rich conversations. Now, I have to tell you that while we go to these retreats and we do video them from beginning to end, for the most part, we hear very little in rich conversations. We have heard more rich conversations by listening to the audio of the closed meetings that have been released to us than in any other meetings at all. That's where the rich conversations are being held. That's where the discussions about redevelopment are truly being held, are at the closed meetings, of which now we have the audio of, in which the last 2 news programs that we have shared them with the public. So, Mr. Berglund, go ahead.
And I don't want to be a fly in the ointment, or I don't want to call them flat out liars, but what I've seen at the retreat, and I think this 2019 retreat just held this week is a perfect example. Their primary interest is to keep high-fiving each other, meaning the council high-fives the staff for such wonderful and grand work, and the staff high-fives the council. It's more of just back and forth saying that everything is wonderful and we need to do more of the same, which we're doing. And there doesn't seem to be any difficult conversations at all unless there's some sort of code language, because everybody is throwing compliments to each other and they're all smiling. And if these are rich conversations, if these are answering difficult questions, if these are engaging in some sort of meaningful conversation, and wow, city manager, man, you did a great job this year.
Woo-hoo!
Councilmember Jordan, wow, you really hit a high note.
Imagine the size of ulcers they must have, right? Okay, well, let's get started with excerpts that we have of the day's worth of retreat. Now, they, of course, went on and on for hours and hours and hours, and we are able to break down that time into film footage of an hour's newscast to be able to give you the insight as to what was said, what was the direction, and really the flavor of the whole retreat. So while they spent 6 to 8 hours I've excluded lunch if we say 6 hours. It was 8 hours once you include the breakfast and the lunch and all. Well, you know, they spent that amount of time. We're going to spend an hour to tell you exactly what happened. So let's take a look at our first clip, which we're going to be talking over to show you the glimpse of the servery that is supposed to be a hot focal point of the Wakefield Pavilion. There we go. So here's the kitchen area. You can see the kitchen sink, and there is that 40-cup coffee maker and the little area where you can serve your food. That's the entryway into the room. Now here's the room as it's constructed. You can see there are a lot of windows, and they are going to be having their meeting at tables. The capacity of the room, if you want to use chairs and tables, the capacity is 65 people. If you want to just line up chairs end on end, they say the capacity is 90 people. So that is what that looks like to give you a flavor of that servery. Now the servery does not have a stovetop in it. So if you are bringing food that needs to be warmed up, you are unable to do it with the equipment that is there, that you would have to bring your own hot plates. There are, I believe, I was told that there are only 8 outlets, so that they've been promoting this as a place where you could have family potlucks with many, many crock pots. But again, I would caution people that if you think you're going to have more than 8 crock pots, you might want to bring an extension cord. There's also no dishwasher, and the refrigerator is very small. So if you have a larger family event, or you are having a caterer come in to cater your event, the caterer will not necessarily have the type of refrigeration space that they need and that they are required by state law to have to keep food at the proper temperature. Mr. Berglund, any other observations you had?
Well, of course, anybody who's going to have a party here, and we're talking not only about a cultural party or a shower, a baby shower, a wedding shower, or a family party, or some sort of, because it has to be a pretty small party. I mean, I guess it's bigger than a house, 65, if it would hold about, at table, 65 people. You know, if you're going to have cut up fruit, if you're going to have cold cuts and cheeses, if you're going to have a tossed salad, all that stuff has to be refrigerated. If you're going to put them in big bowls or on plates, bring your own refrigerator. And of course, that doesn't speak to if you're going to bring drinks like soda and water. Bring it all cold on ice and put it in your chest, I guess, because there's going to be no room in your refrigerator for there. And as you said, as it showed there, you could see a little bit of the refrigerator, and they're so small you can hardly see it in that little room. That coffee maker is a 40, you've seen that, a 40-cup coffee maker. So if you're going to have any coffee, like decaf and regular, or if you got people who like to drink coffee, you're going to be make sure to come early so you can get that coffee going.
Well, yes, you know, and I'm doing the math here now, Mr. Berglund. You bring up a good point. I'm doing the math. Okay, let's say we're having an event and we got 65 adults. And let's say all 65 of those adults would like to have coffee, but you've only got one 40-cup coffee maker. That means that 25 people are going to have to wait until the next pot is brewed. Well, how's that going to work? And you brought up the issue about decaf. What about it? You know, maybe they should have to.
And you're thinking if the city decides they want to run a seminar there on telling people the benefits of what a wonderful city they are in the neighborhood, and how to green city, and how they're pushing people to recycle more and do organic waste and things of that nature, and they want to have a seminar, everybody there is going, so they would probably only need rolls or something like that. So I guess those don't have to be put in the refrigerator. But if they were going to have some lemonade and some milk, and of course coffee. For a city's own promotional thing, they would actually run into some problems.
Right.
And this, of course, is dramatically different than the kind of kitchen that are there in almost all churches in the areas, which they could hold their event to and share some of the city wealth with maintaining those buildings. Or it's in complete direct opposition to what you might get at the Moose Hall, or what you might get at the Hmong Funeral Home Hall, or what you might get, of course, at any of the community school, or, of course, at the premier location, the Maplewood Community Center, which has a wonderful kitchen.
Which then you would be renting from the YMCA. There you go. And, well, this is public access television, and we cannot tell you prices. We can tell you that if you want to use this community Wakefield Pavilion, it will cost you easily 3 times more than you simply rent a pavilion from Ramsey County at the county park only a couple blocks away. So that gives you an idea of the competition that Maplewood has in the neighborhood, not only from other public entities like Ramsey County or the YMCA, but also, as Mr. Berglund indicated, the private entities that are also in the neighborhood. So now the next clip is where appointed Mayor Marley Abrams welcomes everyone. And so you thought maybe, well, no, first of all, we're going to show you what the acoustics sound like, and then we're going to go to her.
Anyway, we actually voted on this bill. It was a big decision for $3 million. We looked at this, and I remember talking about the first vision of it. It looked a little like a bunker to me. It doesn't look like a bunker now. You know, we circled back and did some more work on it, and this is a beautiful facility.
So you could hear there that the acoustics are pretty poor. Now imagine trying to have an event at this location where it's primarily seniors. First of all, the background noise is going to make it very difficult for seniors and for even other folks to hear what is being said. But for many people, this would be a roadblock to renting this particular location for a meeting.
And of course, this is a brand new facility, just constructed, a brand new facility. This isn't an old facility renovated, or this is a brand new vision that a Maplewood had. And of course, the thing you have to be wary of is if you are actually going to try to pay attention and listen to somebody talking in that kind of environment, you know what, you bring your aspirin, because you're headed for, undoubtedly, in many cases, a headache.
So, and unfortunately, Maplewood, when they were having their retreat, they didn't have microphones even to enable the participants of the retreat to be able to hear what the speaker was saying. So while they're at tables, and certainly are a little closer to the speaker than our camera, it still, I think, would have been helpful for the speakers to have had a microphone so they could have been heard better. So there could have been better participation, because in the short time that I was there, it appeared that many people weren't necessarily participating because you really couldn't hear what anyone else was saying anyway.
And you know, when you talk about seniors, you have 2 of their new members, that one gentleman who you had at the top of the show who was appointed, who looks the one who looks kind of like the same old good old boy and kind of has that same kind of attitude and that kind of smirk on his face. But you have the other woman they put on here, she's a senior. You have the other lady who's been on there forever, Kathy Juneman, she's a senior, probably approximately 70 years old. And so,
And I would be willing to bet that Marley Abrams is getting those mailings from AARP as well. So the only one who isn't getting the mailings from AARP would be Councilmember Brian Smith.
right. So there is an issue, like you said, that they need to have some sort of amplification, because for almost the entire staff of Maplewood and the city council, they don't have strong, distinctive voices. They're kind of mushy mouth, and it kind of is hard to understand. So they need to have something to boost their soft-spoken voices up to a certain extent.
Or maybe that's the basis of the difficult conversations, is that it's difficult to hear. Perhaps that's what he really meant when he said difficult conversations. Well, let's go on to the next clip as we start getting into the meat of the retreat, and we hear from City Manager Melinda Coleman.
Really fun agenda, a little bit of strengths finders, which is always good. And then we're going to look at our strategic plan, and then we're going to talk about communication. So, welcome everyone. I remember my very first one as a council member. I still remember it because I learned something about myself, and I learned something about the group and each individual in the group, and it was really fun. I think gives us the opportunity that I think this is an amazing group that's gathered here today, and I'm just excited about what we're going to be able to do for our community. So with that, I'll turn it over to Melinda.
So today we're going to do a little exercise. I'm going to do a quick overview of why we do strengths and what strengths is really all about. So at work, I have the opportunity to do what I do best every day. That's the whole premise of why we introduce strengths into our organization. And we have been working on this for probably this is our third year maybe. And last year I got certified as a strengths coach. So I have been coaching staff as individuals, and we have done 3 training sessions last fall with our public safety staff, Army firefighters and police officers. We had 3 different training sessions for them. It was really, I thought, a really excellent time to get them in. But just to tell you a little bit about the foundation for strengths, the whole premise is that our strengths are enduring and unique. It's not what we do, it's how we do things.
At the beginning of our clip, appointed Mayor Marley Abrams talks about how much she gained from past retreats. And you heard that she focused on what she gained was how to understand more about herself and the other people that she has to work with. Well, that's because they focused on these traits and these skills, and they did this inventory, and then they spent hours and hours and hours talking about what types of skills each person has, where their strengths and their weaknesses are. And again, this year is no different. They did exactly the same thing again. So she didn't talk about that the importance of the retreat for her was the discussions and policy discussions about redevelopment or fiscal priorities or any of that. It was about how do we get along and how do we play in the sandbox together, knowing what our strengths and weaknesses are. Wow, that's really challenging. Imagine that. And of course, Melinda Coleman, the city manager, got up and said, well, that's what we've been doing here at City Hall. I've been mentoring a bunch of the city staff people so we can all work together better. Isn't that really what the city manager, though, is supposed to do as part of her duties? It shouldn't be something that, oh, she is making it like she's doing it over and above what her day-to-day job is. Mr. Berglund, didn't it make it sound like that was something over and above her day-to-day duties?
I think it was, like you said, she was promoting has value added, that she is now if I understood her correctly, She was a certified mentor. So this was an extra value she was going to bring that she was going to add on to all the other complication of work she does up at City Hall. And not to keep beating a dead horse about that building, behind the speaker there, it's as if there's a green tarp. I can't really figure out what that is. I know that in that first video we've seen, they said their fireplace was one of the big strong points of the whole room to keep you warm and cozy. And my question is, if this fireplace is so beautiful, why do they have this big, I'm assuming the fireplace is right there because I didn't see any fireplace any place else in the building. Why do they have it hidden by this green tarp?
Maybe it's not functional yet. Well, let's continue with our next clip.
People in this theme prefer to go with flow. They tend to be now people and take things as they come and discover the future one day at a time. That makes sense, right?
Now, the two individuals that stood up and the one staff person that stood up, they stood up because she is focusing and highlighting at that particular point one of the particular traits on this chart. And Mr. Berglund, remember how in the beginning we had our clip of Mr. Bill Knutson where he was saying you have to be adaptive, right? Well, lo and behold, 2 months later, when he does his little personality test so that he can participate in this retreat, he happens to be one of the 3 individuals on this chart that is at the top of the tables for adaptive. And guess who the other person is who has the highest score in addition to Bill Knutson for being adaptive? And that is the other newly appointed city council member, Sylvia Neblett. So here you go, your 2 council persons that they appointed are adaptive. And you heard what Melinda Coleman said, the city manager. She said that one of the traits of being adaptive or adaptability is that you want to go along to get along. Now, I found this to be so totally fascinating, Mr. Berglund, because we have been indicating on these news programs that the appointed council members were appointed because they are rubber stamps, because they are indeed those individuals that the council members who appointed them knew would go along with the council and not rock the boat. We have now evidence of their own making that they are indeed the 2 people on this chart who have scored 5s for adaptability, for go along, get along, and for rubber stamping. I couldn't believe my ears, Mr. Berglund, to find out that here at the retreat, we find indeed the empirical evidence of what we have been saying and reporting here on these news programs all along.
It might be a flight of fancy, but I don't understand why adaptability, Maplewood, which is in its tough binds that it is in, on so many accounts, so many problems. We're not only talking about their roads, but their business community, Maplewood Mall, the housing stock, high taxes, point after point after point, why they would want adaptability instead of leadership. Because I think even though they keep commending each other, high-fiving each other, thank you for your leadership, thank you for your leadership, but thank you for your leadership, what they really value is followership, just getting along, riding the train, keeping quiet, not advocating, not initiating, not proposing, just, wow, isn't this wonderful?
And so what you're asking then is that what trait would be highly valued in a city that has many challenges? Well, there are many different traits that are on this chart that we could look at and maybe point out, but the one that I think would be the most valued is that of being an analytical thinker, of being able to weigh the facts and the consequences and to really be able to plan things out based upon analysis and being analytical thinkers. So in this next clip, Melinda Coleman highlights all the people in the room, staff members and council members, who are analytical thinkers. Let's take a look.
Analytical. Here we go. Here's my favorites. So, people, especially talented and analytical, they search for reasons and causes. They have the ability to think about all the factors that might affect the situation. So I know Mike's going to have a lot of fun. All three of these are going to have a lot of fun writing sheets today.
I guess you can say something. So it was the four of us out here trying to figure out some of the details. Me living in the now.
But see, these two people lead our whole strategic planning. So that's totally perfect. So we're trying to match talents with our projects.
The ones who are the analytical thinkers, the ones that had the score of 5 in this category, is Mike Funk, who is the assistant city manager. Now, this is no surprise because 2 years ago, he also got the high points, the 5 for analytical thinking. And so Melinda Coleman, the city manager, she shuffles all the stuff that requires analytical thinking down to Mike Funk, and he's actually the workhorse up there at City Hall. And then next we have Lois Knutson, who also has a 5. Now she's involved, I believe, in the finances and some of the processes up at the city of Maplewood, and that's good. Then the third individual who had a high mark, not a 5, but he had a 4, that is Joe Sheeran. And he, of course, is the guy they hired to be in charge of the communications department. So you see, they've got an analytical thinker on how to spin the message. But they don't have an analytical thinker in a city manager. That is not one of Melinda Coleman's strengths. Now, looking at the council, appointed Mayor Marley Abrams, she's been an attorney for 30 years and is a skilled litigator. Guess what, Mr. Berglund? She also did not score analytical. And I find that totally bewildering, because how can a person be a skilled litigator and have that on their resume, and yet when they take the test of their skills after 30 years of litigating, analytical thinking is not on the list?
And it might fly in the face of logic, I guess, to believe that analytical thinking would not be a significant skill set you would like to have. But it seems that when you're talking about limited budgets and a lot of needs in any city, especially in Maplewood, and a very challenging ability to continue to raise more fees and more taxes, you would like somebody who can rationally and systematically find a way to take those limited resources and distribute them so there's maximum effectiveness. Isn't that what rational thinking is? Isn't that what analytical thinking is to actually be balancing the numbers and to get efficiency and effectiveness and efficacy out of the resources that you've collected for the population so the population can benefit. My question is there anybody on the city council who rates high, scores high on analytical thinking? We know that the mayor doesn't, or the supposed mayor, because she was appointed through some really funny processes there.
And looking at this chart, which of course is one of the pieces of data that was presented and reviewed at the retreat, no one on the council has the skill set of analytical thinking.
And the question is, you would hope that your finance director, the bean counter, would actually have that as a top skill, because the bean counter is dealing with numbers and those values every day. Did L.A. Pulsett, the finance director of Maplewood, did she score high on the analytical thinking category?
She got a 5 in Achiever.
Okay.
So she's driven to achieve.
Well, she's got a good job, which gives her a lot of money and a lot of health care and a lot of pension benefits. So I guess she has, achieved what she needs.
Right, and she did get a 4 in futuristic. The future of Maplewood is we better get our finances in order or we're going to be in dire straits. I guess that's what it means to be a futurist in the finance department. Okay, well, let's continue on, because you see from there, then they had their lunch break after they spent the whole morning working on how they're going to work together based upon now understanding each other's skill sets. So then, after lunch, then Joe Sheeran, he decided, Joe Sheeran was on deck. The individual that we indicated had a 4 in analytical thinking, and he is the communications department head, and he's giving an update on what has gone on in the last year since last year's retreat, when they were talking about branding and how to sell their story better up at City Hall. So let's take a look.
Tell you, in the messaging there, what did you get out of it? What kind of feeling? That's our biggest thing with stories, it's how to make you feel. What kind of feeling did you have about our art?
I thought it was authentic.
Yeah, we could have went the easy way. We could have been in and out there in 10 minutes and just had Steve Lucas stand in front of a fire truck and say, hey, we're looking for firefighters to do X, Y, and Z. We had to tell the story and give you kind of a day in the life. And that's what we're trying to get.
He had just got done showing a video that his department had produced regarding the fire department. And as you could hear, he is indicating to those at the retreat that the purpose of the video is to evoke emotion. How do you feel after watching this video? Not what have you learned as a result of this video. So the question I would pose, Mr. Berglund, are videos that a communications department of an arm of the government, are these videos, should they be created to invoke emotions and how people feel, or should they be developed to impart information that's important for the residents?
Well, let me flush that through my mind, but you would think that if you want your community to be engaged, if you want them to be able to come to the table and have a conversation, if you want to include a lot of people in the decision making and not think we'll just make the decisions and what do the public even need to know what our decisions have been. You would think that you would want to communicate plainly and clearly what are the facts, to present the facts as the key thing. This is the fact, and this is the fact, and this is the fact, instead of just trying to appeal, to try to heighten, I guess, one's one's emotions so
Well,
that they
and
emote out.
making a person feel really good about the fire department. Well, you could feel really good about the fire department until you have a medical call requirement and you're having a heart attack, and the response time is 15 minutes instead of the 5 minutes that you thought is what they would have since you felt really good about their video.
Now-
You see, now that's the difference.
Now, getting back to the on this issue of the analytical thinking, even though you have these videos and you put these videos up on YouTube, and you have a city of 37,000 people, and 30 people click on the video, if nobody's watching, why are we spending hundreds of thousands of dollars of resources putting together these YouTube videos?
Good point, and entirely. What is the scope of the viewing audience that you've reached? If you've got this population of 38,000 and only 30 people in your whole community, and there's no guarantee that those 30 people are all from Maplewood, have clicked on your video, your penetration into your viewing audience is pretty much nil. So let's move on to the next clip where Weatherman Joe has a little more to say.
Especially Chad, because he works on the videos for the most part, is I don't want it to look like a government video. If it looks like a government video, you fail. Even in this, community, not community, but the community plan video we did, we knew our audience was government community, was government administrators, and we knew we didn't have to go above and beyond. What we wanted to do is establish Maplewood's communication team as a leader when it comes to communications and communicators. We don't want our stuff to look like, I think that's the problem. You don't think of yourself as a marketer, you think of yourself as a government service delivery first, not necessarily as a marketer, as an IT leader, or as somebody who provides world-class parks and recreation systems.
So the gist of what I got there is that he's looking to make Maplewood's communication team as the epitome of communications teams, and that they are going to be known as the leaders of governmental communication to the masses. Isn't that what you got from that?
I wasn't sure what to get out of that, but they were going to be a leader of something, and it wasn't going to be a leader of community services. It seemed like it was going to be a leader of, like you said, getting people to feel emotively about what's going on in Maplewood.
Right. Well, let's continue.
This year, it brings our communication platform way more visual. We know that people really read our newsletter, but they don't take the time to dive into every story. Yes, we're going to tell that narrative, person-driven story, but we also know that out of the entire 8 pages, you might read 2 paragraphs. So we're really trying to chunk stuff down into visuals. The more visual, the better. You just get a quick snapshot.
So their information that they're going to get out there is going to be more visual rather than actually imparting much of any kind of information. And you heard him talk about, well, people don't have time to go beyond the sound bites. That's really all we're going to feed the people because that's really all they want. And yet, is that true? Is that really all the people want from their government when their government is supposed to be communicating information about what the government is doing, what services are available, and how to best participate in the grassroots public policy?
And I think that everything you said, which people should, which is the idealistic notion that people should care about their government, they don't believe people care about it, and they don't believe people, more importantly, should care about it. They just want people to feel, despite whatever kind of job they're doing, even if it is failing, they want people to feel good, and that is their objective,
right.
Up at the administrative objective up at City Hall.
So let's
as the top priority.
So let's take a look at the next clip where Weatherman Joe talks about how they dealt with the issue of police use of force and putting that message into a nice, tidy package.
A couple of key elements, a couple of key numbers, and you're ready to go. The one thing we're trying to do with the use of force was to really show, out of 34,000 calls, only 26 actually result in force. I mean, the media has painted police out there, shoot first, ask questions second. But we really wanted to change that paradigm. I think the number that we did, Chad and I created this, we really debated, do we want to highlight 26 or 0.07? And we decided 26 because we pull off a 34, and then the big number down here is 0. We didn't have to use a canine. We didn't apply force to juveniles, and we didn't want fire discharge of the fireworks.
Here he's trying to say how they wanted to really frost the cake when it came to reporting about police use of force in the community, and to gloss over it, to make it sound like, oh, we really don't have a problem. So he says out of 34,000 calls, only 26 resulted in police use of force. Now, the Minnesota Department of Health, they oversee caterers and people who make food and then serve it at various events. And the Minnesota Department of Health takes food poisoning or food that is not properly prepared very seriously. And so they would never look at it and say, well, of the 34,000 meals or 34,000 events that have been catered in Minnesota, we feel very proud that only 26 of them resulted in people being rushed to the hospital because of food poisoning. You would never hear something like that from the Minnesota Department of Health, because the goal is 0. Not to say, oh, what a good job we've done. It was only this many. So I found it very fascinating that he used this as an example of how they're trying to spin the message and to minimize what exactly is going on.
And of course, after all this, you also have to trust their numbers. And there's a question, I think, because they're trying to spin and frame and twist and maneuver their numbers in such a way that if you don't see any raw data, if you don't see, you say, really, is any of this, can we trust anything what you're really saying?
Right.
I mean, are you really using the numbers in the appropriate way? Are you really reporting to us what's really going on up at City Hall? What, of course, is challenging is why is the spin doctor, the PR guy, giving the presentation on that instead of the police chief, who is the expert and who has the information and has the data?
Now, here is the last clip from Joe.
Community leaders at some place like the MCC. You had Healthies coming, you had folks from Baldwin Inn coming, you had a lot of big time people, and you want to show that you're good stewards of taxpayer dollars, but at the same time you can put on a good show, and you can really do things well, and make them entertaining and engaging, and again, it shows that you're cut above the rest when it comes to that thing.
You want to show everyone, no matter who they are, the middle class guy, the big shots, the businesses, that in your message you can put on a good show. That is so telling to me of the mindset of the communication department at Maplewood. Well, now, Mr. Berglund, we have come to the end of our program, and the last segment of this retreat we will save for another day. But to give our viewers a little insight into what to look for next week is that guess who's going to facilitate the last segment of the retreat, but none other than Council Member Brian Smith himself. And we'll find out what difficult conversations He is facilitating between the staff and the city council members at this year's retreat. Now, Mr. Berglund, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And viewers, thank you for tuning in. We'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.